Welcome to What's in Store with Carly and Chris, the show where we cover hot topics at the cross-section of retail and real estate. I'm Carly Iacono, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Ressa. Chris, great to see you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Loving life, no complaints. Are you as excited about the change in federal monetary policy as I am? This is a big deal to me.
I don't know that I'm as excited as you. I am generally positive on it. There's good and bad from business perspective. I think there's a lot of good that this does, and I think more than not, it is positive for sure. It's going to open up some opportunities, but it creates more competition.
Darn.
It creates more competition. So that's the negative. It does create more competition.
Well, as a broker, I fully support additional competition. I can see as an owner, maybe you don't as much, but I can tell you I am talking about this on parties, out to dinner. I mean, maybe I'm not that exciting in general, but that is very, very big deal. So that's not what today's episode is.
Yep.
For everyone listening. We just had to bring it up quickly because obviously it's top of mind.
For sure.
I think we'll pick it back up in November when we see what the Fed does next.
Yeah, I think there'll be more, and I think overwhelmingly it's positive, but it does create more competition. So
that's what I like to hear. All right, let's move on to today's episode. We are talking about how legacy brands, really established brands, are continuing to fuel growth. And I think this is an especially timely episode because there's been a spattering, if you will, of retail closings in the news, right? Some big names we've heard of, CVS trimming the portfolio, Dollar General closing some, Family Dollar, et cetera. So I think it's easy to read these headlines with a few national retailers and say, nobody's expanding or retail's not on the same trajectory it was. And as we both know, that is not the case. So today we're going to go through sort of three main ways that legacy brands are fueling this expansion that we're excited about. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The first one is probably the most obvious, and this is sort of a geographic plan where you're opening more stores, more locations. This could be Starbucks going into more tertiary markets. Could be Aldi's merger to tap into the Southeast. Nothing is really earth-shattering about that part of the strategy, but I wanted to touch on it to show that it's still happening, right? Existing brands are still pushing into markets they haven't been in, and we're still seeing growth there. Can you think of other examples there? Yeah.
I think it's the most, not only is it just still happening, it's happening at a higher rate than it's happened in a long time. That curve is still growing, and that is still a challenge for some retailers to find locations because retail is so occupied. So I don't think it's just still happening. I think it's happening, and it's a growing trend, and that list is really long.
It is. And we could probably just talk about that for 45 minutes.
Yeah,
all
for
the
sure.
retailers that are expanding and where, and, touch on different parts of the country.
Yeah.
But let's move on. You brought up something in terms of geography that I thought was really interesting in one of our last conversations, and that was looking globally and how international markets might impact a brand. Give us the
Yeah,
example.
so the one that I thought was interesting was there was a lot of press around Birkenstock opening a location in Paris. And, in retail, we have some fixed opening dates that are like branded into people's minds, right? We have before Black Friday, we have before Easter, back to school, and there's not many more opening dates. And everyone wants to get new brands up and running as quickly as possible. And so Birkenstock was opening in Paris, which is obviously a pretty high fashion city, international city, and they wanted to open it before the Olympics. And the concept, at least as I read, was they were going to get all these international eyes on their store and their brand, and it was going to be a catalyst for the rest of their store growth in Europe, which I thought was fascinating for a few reasons. One, pretty astute, right? Like to open before the Olympics, and it made me think of what other events and things might expand the opening date range for retailers to leverage this multifaceted growth, which is one, they just have the new store growth in Paris, great city, but they're capturing all these international tourists for the Olympics. And those tourists are going to go back who maybe didn't know what Birkenstock was and now have, seen that brand and potentially become customers for that brand. And so I thought that was interesting. And I thought, I bet there's going to be other events and opportunities that are going to expand opening dates beyond the traditional. And not only do they expand the opening dates, but that new opening date is going to be the catalyst for growth in ways that maybe some retailers hadn't thought about before.
And I love that your point wasn't they're going into Europe, so they opened in Paris. Okay.
Right.
It's they chose this location because of a global event that gave them exposure to an incredible range of consumers that they wouldn't have had those touch points.
Right.
So I think phase 2 of that is, how does this store perform post-Olympics? Or is that not the point? And if it's not about the long-term performance and it's more about gaining attention around a key event, then couldn't you argue you could do a pop-up shop?
Yeah, so that is certainly, the pop-up shop is certainly, people are doing that centered around events because events happen. But I guess can you have this, fortuitous event where all these things come together, where you're capturing an event, but it would otherwise be a location we would go to anyway. And maybe this is the catalyst for that. And what that allows is opening on this unique timeline. It allows for, a really strong out-of-the-gate performance of a store. Like the out-of-the-gate performance is really important to retailers. And so I'm curious, we have the Olympics coming to LA. Mm-hmm. I imagine that is going to be a catalyst. In fact, I know some retailers who are already working on deals centered around that concept.
We have the World Cup coming to New Jersey.
We have the World Cup.
What is that, 2 years?
Yep. Pretty and exciting. So are there these other events that are going to help be a catalyst for retailers? And so, and will retailers start to use other events, maybe not just sporting, but other events for this?
Taylor Swift concerts? I feel like that drives everything.
That drives everything.
Maybe that's a new store opening target. Gosh, it'd be crazy. But so I think that's a really interesting point, right? It's not just we need to be in this market because this is our next target market. It's we need a store here because of this big event, and then that's going to be a springboard for all these other things in that region potentially. Yeah. So really, really great point. The second thing we're going to talk about are new concepts within established brands. And we've talked about this in different ways before, but I think it's an important piece of the growth strategy because it's taking a brand that you're already familiar with and allowing them to capture additional market share in ways they couldn't before. So you'd come up with some very interesting examples. So I won't take them from you. Share the Ace Hardware.
I think we often focus when we're talking about new concepts of like these new, especially from that hit the news wire, are these lifestyle brands that are high fashion, and there's a lot of other new exciting concepts out there, and they're not just all these super lifestyle-y brands, and there's nothing against those. I love those brands. I'm a consumer. In some of them, we're a landlord, but there's a lot of other groups. Sometimes they're local in nature, and that's why I thought Ace Hardware was really interesting. They have this new store, Elevate, that they're opening, and I thought that was just super interesting because it's a new concept that is going to be rolled out that is physical products being sold that is going to be rolled out into, local communities. And I thought that was interesting.
And I read they're spending over $1 billion to open new stores and renovate existing stores to the Elevate brand.
Yeah.
And there's a whole area where you can test grills, and they're going to have community barbecues
Yeah.
and local products. So I think we need that.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Right? But it's a national brand with a local feel. And I think that will be very well received. I personally need a new grill, don't know which one to buy. I think that would be a fantastic opportunity to go connect with the brands and see what I liked. So,
are you a big griller?
I mean, not huge, but I like to have one that works. So,
Have you looked at a Traeger?
No. Did you just solve this problem right here? Do I not need to go to Ace Hardware Elevate? Come on.
Yeah, it just depends on how high tech you want to be on your grill.
Okay.
Like, do you want to start the grill from your phone, from your car as you're driving home?
Yes.
Put the exact temperature in that you want. What? There's grills out there like that. Yeah, there's grills out there like that.
All right. Well, there you go. You just solved that problem, right? Or maybe just made me spend a lot of money.
So before you just decide that you're doing that, you should check some pricing for sure.
Yeah. Noted. And hopefully an Ace Hardware will have this pop-up shop.
There you go.
Or not pop-up shop, this new concept opening soon for sure.
Yes.
I think there were a few others that we wanted to touch on before we moved on. Fresh Grocer was one that we both were
Wakefern
around,
is rolling out Fresh Grocer. They just opened it up in Long Island. This really smaller format, fresh, a lot of prepared foods, all different produce. So I thought that was interesting. A legacy brand opening a new concept. This is a brand that already has multiple concepts. It's got traditional ShopRite, and they have some of the ShopRites are different in appearance and how they and what they present, and then they have the Price Right brand, and now they have now Fresh Grocer, and they're doing some of these locations. So, as you said before, as we have a bankruptcy hit the news, I think it's interesting when there's these new concepts that are rolling out, and the news does talk about at least the public companies that are rolling out new locations and new geographies of their existing concepts. But there's a bunch of new concepts that are rolling out that are not just incubated brands, but that are from legacy, mature, strong retailers, and not just retailers, other brands that I think are interesting.
And I think that's an important distinction because it maintains the credit profile in a lot of our investment properties, right?
Sure.
We love mom and pop businesses. They bring character. There's a lot of wonderful things about small business, but tend to have an affinity for the national companies because of the credit guarantees. So personally, in my line of work, I like to see the established corporate brands opening new concepts because then at least I know I have something backing that lease and gives investors a lot more comfort.
Sure.
So I think that's really nice. And the Fresh Grocer one I thought was particularly interesting because it was the first I'd seen that was produce forward. Typically, right, it's the other way. You're going to things that aren't perishable, and they're saying, no, we're taking that head on, and we're going to be produce forward, and that's the main value proposition in areas that not necessarily as densely I guess, filled with opportunities for fresh food. So kind of tapping into some other markets.
Yeah, I think it's suburban in nature, and I think it's a really cool store. I haven't been there yet. It's a bunch of pictures. I think it's going to be awesome. So
new concepts, legacy brands, love those. Let's move on to our third category, which is established companies entering bricks and mortar. This is a fun one because you get lots of kind of wonky things that you're like, oh, I didn't know they would need a retail location. And our most exciting example now is Netflix. Opening, I think it's 100,000 square feet location in King of Prussia Mall. Wild. I think they're having two, one in Dallas as well. Okay, I'd only heard about the first one. That's great that there's another one already.
Thanks.
So really interesting concept based on shows. There'll be, experiences, Squid Games, glass ceiling walks. didn't watch
The
the
word
show
I
that
read
you
a
think.
lot was immersive.
Right.
Immersive was the word I kept reading.
So it's a way
strong
to
word.
connect to these shows in a real life setting, which
Yeah.
is, and they can change it based on what's popular, food offerings based on the cooking shows. So if you are a huge Netflix fan, I mean, you can go and be part of these shows.
Yeah.
Speak, right?
Yeah, it
Cool
was like
idea.
Bridgerton.
Right.
It was wild. Yeah. I think it'll definitely, I'm curious how many new customers it will bring to
Right.
Netflix. I don't know if that's the intent, or is it to make the existing customer base even more loyal, or maybe expose the existing Netflix customer to other shows
right.
and products,
Right.
so that it enhances those. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but I think it is a really interesting concept. That'll be one, like, I go and visit retail locations every year and new concepts. I make sure I get to, if someone, Dick's Sporting Goods opening up a House of Sports somewhere along my travels, I need to make sure I'm going and seeing these concepts. This will be one I definitely tour at some point. So
Bring the whole family.
I will report back on this.
Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of when Crayola opened up the Crayola stuff in like old department stores in the mall.
Right.
So that's another one, like a major brand who did that. But that brand, you can buy crayons in physical retail stores. So to me, that was more of a like a D2C play in an immersive experience. This is different because you're not actually buying products from Netflix today.
Right.
You will be in this location. They're going to have a lot of fan-filled stuff around these shows and products. So
imagine the merchandise. It makes me think of getting off of a ride at Disney and you have to walk through the gift shop and it's everything you can think of, right? Connected to each of their shows.
For sure.
I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And at a minimum, it's a brilliant marketing tool, I think, right? Because people are going to talk. We're talking about it right now, right?
For
We're
sure.
talking about Netflix. We're talking about the shows, whether we go or not. I think you and I will probably go at some point because we're in the business, but whether the average person goes or not, they're still going to know this exists and they're going to hear about these different experiences. And I think it is a way to make the consumer loyal or at least excited about the brand over any of the other streaming platforms because you feel more connected.
What I'm curious about, and I'll have to do some digging and make some calls to see. I'm curious how they chose the location. So clearly, obviously, King of Prussia is one of the best malls in the country.
Dense demographics,
right? But so Philadelphia, right? Market MSA. So why Philly over New York, right? It could have been American Dream in New York, right?
Right.
New York Metro. It could have been a bunch of things in other markets. Vegas seems like a place that, right? So why Philadelphia? And this one. So when I say that, and it could be a simple one, but does Philadelphia have, is it white space? Is there not enough Netflix customers there? Is there a high amount of Netflix customers there, and they believe, since there's such an affinity in Netflix in Philadelphia, that they're going to get more people coming there and buying these products and engaging. So maybe I don't know, but why when I left there, I was like, oh, interesting. And people will think like, oh, King of Prussia, one of the better malls in America. That makes a lot of sense.
How do we get that data? Because that is a really interesting point, right? Like, what is the correlation to Netflix subscribers? Anyone listening works at Netflix, please tell us. We need the correlation. Yeah.
I've talked to this is not like, so I've talked to a lot of retailers about site selection over the last 20 years, right? And there's a lot of retailers using e-commerce data in interesting ways to figure out locations, right?
Yeah.
Right. So some are doing things as well. We have a high percentage of our customers in this market from an e-commerce. It's going to be a more successful brick and mortar. Some will say, well, we have these three markets here, We have a lot of e-commerce customers. Here's what the demographics are in these 3 markets. Those 3 markets are very similar demographically and psychodemographically to this market over here. We don't have enough e-commerce customers here. Can we open a store here and help grow that physical retail and the e-commerce in this market? So those are some simple ways that people look at it. There's much more advanced ways that retailers are looking at it, and it's evolved over the years. But I was left wondering. I was like, why Philly? And Philly's great, and but there's more than Philly's great that came behind the decision. So
you took that a step farther than I did in my mind. I figured, well, they must have gotten a really good deal on the rent, and the parking was good, and their lease was favorable. But your point that it probably has something to do with density of Netflix subscribers, not just population density, is. I
mean, but
maybe
I imagine they could have found equivalent deal terms in multiple markets, and so whatever those deal terms were.
Right.
So if that was the case, why there?
Exactly. All right. We'll get to the bottom of this. Not quite sure how, but we've got to now. Another one we were chatting about in this kind of same concept is Wayfair.
Yeah.
Right? Online only used to be, now opening physical locations. That one I think it's a little bit clearer because it's a physical product that you're buying.
Totally.
Right? Furniture kind of feels like it would be home goods-ish, but with more furniture offerings. What do you think the genesis was behind their in-store
I think that one is I'm surprised it's been this long. I think generally speaking, most either DTC or e-commerce brands, if that's how they're started, eventually will end up in the physical retail space some way, shape, or form. So, but I think it's a big one, right? So it's important to talk about because it's a big name that's a huge e-commerce business that's opening stores. I am wondering, like, if there's more of these non-retail businesses that will take advantage of connecting with the customer in a physical presence like Netflix has. Are there more brands and businesses that will do things like this? Because, right, I think people would have thought, like, my initial thing for if I was like, all right, Netflix is going to get into retail, how would you have thought they got into it?
Probably a line of products that they then sell at Target or somewhere else, right? From a store. Like, here's the...
So if you told me Netflix was going to get into retail, what would you think? And this might be silly. My thought would have been like, okay, they're going to... This is going to be their live venue place to
like a movie theater?
Like a movie theater.
Oh, yeah, that didn't occur to me.
That's what I would have thought they would have done. Like been in that business.
We're both wrong. Yeah.
Right? Right. I would have thought, all right, we have the at-home movie watcher. Now I want to go grab the in-theater movie watcher.
I want to see what proportion of their profits are tied to the merchandise, the products at the end. I would love to see that data, right? Is this really successful because everyone leaves with their branded shirt, stuffed animal, whatever, right, connects to that show? Their cooking, apron from their favorite cooking show. Do they leave with something like that and that's where the profit is? Or is the profit in the ticket sales and the increased subscribers? I mean, I don't know that we'll ever see that breakdown, but I think that's really interesting. So
yeah, we'll see.
Is it a non-physical brand monetizing a physical product, or is really the benefit to the non-physical piece of the brand at the end of the day?
Yeah. Are there other businesses that we think could end up who are not selling a physical product either online or in the retail space, but they might end up opening stores one day because it would make sense, just like Netflix? Maybe for next episode.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to brainstorm on that. I can't think of anything else right now. Can you?
I can. I've got some, but I'm going to wait till next episode when we talk about it.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So we have to like put that out there.
Yeah.
Chris has the answers for the next brilliant business idea, but we're not going to tell you what it is. Okay, fair enough. Let's wrap up with some ideas on why these different buckets of growth really show that retail is durable. Because I think that's the end message here, right? We can look at store closings. There will always be store closings and store openings. That is just the way that industry works and commerce works in general. But when we have so many veins of expansion, so many ways that companies are utilizing bricks and mortar, I think that's really the message, right? That points to the durability of retail overall. Any concluding thoughts on how this all ties together?
You nailed it. Got it.
All right, so you have the secret business. I have the perfect summary. I think we're good. We're done. To everyone listening, that was What's in Store with Carly and Chris. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.